I made the decision to leave my corporate job, but I gave myself a little time to soul search and I'm like, I don't want to do this. This is not what I want to be doing 10 years from now, 20 years from now, especially not 50 years from now.
Today's guest is Elizabeth Dempsey Beggs, a U.S. Army veteran who has pivoted in her career from the military to corporate America to now figuring out her next step while living her passion for parenthood and advocacy.
I use social media as a tool to empower people to become foster parents. I'm not okay with how we're talking about people. I'm not okay with burning through people solely for profit. How could I be quiet when these things are going on?
How much money are you making right now?
Last year I was just right over.
Hi, Elizabeth. Welcome to the pod.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining. I am so excited to talk and hear about your journey and your career path and everything. And I just love following you on Instagram, on TikTok. Like, I love your stuff. I love how much you share. And so I just feel so honored that I get to help tell part of your story today
Thank
with
you.
us. And to kick things off, what are you currently doing for work right now?
So I recently made the switch to work for myself. I've been thinking about this answer, so I'm like, I know she's going to ask me, and it's the first time in my life, and I think it speaks to bigger picture when we talk about finances and how much you make. It's the first time in my life I don't have a
Mm-hmm.
title, even since I was like 16, 17. I've always been officially employed by somebody else, and I don't right now. I made the decision to leave my corporate job, and we can dive into that if you want later.
Yeah,
But I made that decision,
definitely.
and I don't. Some people are like, oh, you're going like full-time influencing, and I'm not. So I do
Mm-hmm.
like to say I work in advocacy, and I work myself as an advocate, and social media is definitely a tool that I use
Mm-hmm.
to do that. I never really made anything on social media, so when I quit, like that wasn't my plan. But I mean, maybe 100 here, maybe 100 there, but like nothing compared to what I was making in a corporate role, and I'm not
Mm-hmm.
there yet. But I feel like the universe was like good decision because I resigned and I was planning to go back into a corporate role, just take like 6 months off, do essentially what I was doing for another company. I had some
Mm-hmm.
offers on the table, but I gave myself a little time to soul search and I'm like, I don't want to do this. This is not what I want to be doing 10 years from now, 20 years from now, especially not 50 years from now. So I talked to my husband. I'm like, what if I didn't go back? I've always done a little bit of real estate, so I decided to
Mm-hmm.
kick off my real estate team. Been really diving into that. So I guess title wise, I am an advocate, and then on the real estate side, I own a real estate team. But that is a new thing. So that, all of a sudden I had some leads come in there, was able to invest some more time there, invest a lot more time into my family. I do have 4 young children, so I'm a
Mm-hmm.
parent and a mom first. I'm also a graduate student, and I decided to apply to law school next year to pursue advocacy
Wow.
more instead of, yeah, so I'll be finishing up my MBA. And instead of using that in a corporate degree, I've decided to apply to law school. That was honestly the plan since I was 17 and then got put on the back burner. We'll figure that all those pieces out as they come, but that was yeah. So that is a really long way
I
of
have so
saying
many
I don't really
questions
know,
now.
but
So, you have said that this is the first time in your life that you've worked for yourself. What were you doing before that?
yeah, I always had a very stable paycheck before that from the time I was probably 14. Started working, waiting tables, all that. And then I taught fitness classes in college while I was an ROTC cadet. And then I went active duty in the military. I spent almost 5 years as an active duty Army officer before switching into corporate, where I went into sales. And then I became a director of sales, building up a brand new division for the company I was at.
So, just a couple things.
Yeah, just a few.
Wow. Okay. You have a lot going on right now.
Yeah,
I also understand 2.5 years ago, I quit my full time job and I started
amazing.
working for myself. And it's led me to so many opportunities, like being able to host this podcast,
That's what I feel
which,
like
yeah.
the things that have come in the last month.
Mm-hmm.
I am so energized and so fulfilled, and even financially, like, have been more than I could ever dream of in this space. And I mean, I get to advocate for foster care and now get paid to do it and work a little more in the political space and stuff. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
if I hadn't taken that leap, I never would have been here. But like, it was so scary, like,
It's so
so scary.
scary.
I'm so grateful to my husband. And we made some cuts, some other financial decisions on our household budget. And, he'd only been back to work after 6 months off of being a stay-at-home dad for 2 weeks. in a brand new job, brand new career, and he's starting his full new career as a firefighter, which is a huge pay cut in December. So
Uh-huh.
it was a really scary leap for our family, but hands down one of the best decisions I've made.
Oh, I'm so glad. Yeah, I mean, I felt the same way. Like when I quit my full time job, my now husband, I guess he was my boyfriend then. Wow. Okay. Time. So much
Amazing.
changes in just a couple
So
years.
quickly, so
He,
quickly.
he was like, you need to do this. This is something that like you've wanted to do. This makes a lot of sense. Like there's so many opportunities that could open up. And like, he was like, I'm here for you. Like, I'm your partner. This is
Yeah,
why
that's
we're together.
yeah. He looked at me, he's like, this is scary. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
and I appreciate that like this is putting a lot more on your shoulders. I've been the breadwinner for 2 years, by a lot. And but he's like, I trust you. He's like, you work so hard and you're so passionate. Like, whatever you feel like you're going to build, I feel like it's going to be tenfold that. So you have my full
Yeah.
support.
So you said that you have been the main breadwinner in your family, and
Hmm.
part of that is because of working in corporate versus your husband working in the public sector and just kind of what that brings. But I wanted to ask, being a woman and being the breadwinner, have you faced any weird stigmas or comments, or even
Yeah.
if you're willing to share, like even in your marriage, has that been something that has been kind of a dicey topic?
Yeah, absolutely. In my marriage, not really. One, my husband's never been one to like ever want to talk
Mm-hmm.
about money. So even with like the investments we've made or the entrepreneurship or like any of the vacation properties that we invested in, that was always me driving that boat and the way my brain works. And he's been very happy to speak. I trust you, go for it. But it was never really our plan. You know, when we
Mm-hmm.
met, we were doing the same job. Now he was an infantry officer, I was an arm officer. So if he, I don't think, we would have fit if he was ever like intimidated with me having a powerful career or any of that because I was there when we met.
Right.
Um, he's always been a big supporter of it. We very much view money like it is our money. Any of the money I
Mm-hmm.
made in corporate, there were late nights, there was a lot of travel. We have so many young kids at home that if he had not risen up to that role, that would
Yeah.
not be possible for me to do. So like any of the money I've made, 100% is because I have a great teammate. So
Mm-hmm.
I've never viewed it as like my money, his money, I'll earn you, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Um, but I think if we like open the door up, even, people are like, oh, that was a terrible idea when he turned down these great orders so that I could pursue a career.
Mm-hmm.
um there was pushback, right? It wasn't traditional. It was never our plan for our marriage. Yeah, I mean there
Yeah.
definitely was. It's not something like, I'm never like, I'm the breadwinner, this is
Yeah.
awesome. I mean, to our girls and stuff too, though, I
Yeah.
think especially as they get older, being like, hey, that was okay. Like, it never
Yeah.
really mattered that I made more
Right.
or he didn't. Like, we have always just been so much of a team. But the openness as my girls get older, especially if like it's like if you find a partner who's not okay that
Mm-hmm.
you out earn them,
You open up so many
yeah.
doors, even though you're giving up, like the idea of giving up a paycheck that would always land in my bank account every 2 weeks, no matter what, no
Hmm.
matter if I took a day off or whatever. Um, but sometimes we're like so held to that structure.
Well, like
It's
the
hard to
golden
leave.
handcuff of it, right? Like the
Mm-hmm.
reality is like my income was, it wasn't astronomically high, but it was
Mm-hmm.
pretty high, especially after leaving the military. And we put the
Yeah.
focus in my career instead of my husband's because it did take off. And,
Mm-hmm.
I'd been working in corporate and then went to pursue an MBA and I'm almost done with that. And it's kind of like, okay, I could probably be a VP in a couple of years and, by 30, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm like, am I doing that to win? And it's not like I didn't enjoy being in corporate either. I would never tell someone like,
Right.
quit your corporate job with no plan and like the universe will
Right.
provide. No, have
Right.
a plan. Like, the only reason I got some money from social media too is it's something I've been doing for a couple of
Mm-hmm.
years already. But I agree, like if you don't make the space for it, it's never gonna show up. And if you don't
Right.
trust yourself, how could somebody else or the universe trust you to provide that?
Right. When you say that part of your social media work is advocacy, can you explain a little bit more about what you mean by that and what you're advocating for?
Yeah, absolutely. So I feel like the bulk of where I focus my advocacy efforts is on foster care. And that in turn gets into the political landscape and policy and financial. educational equality. So it
Mm-hmm.
has, because all of these things are going to touch
Mm-hmm.
the realm of foster care, whether it's access to medical care, to food, to education. There's just so many factors. So I use social media as a tool to empower people to become foster parents, to help in the system, to learn more about that, to provide resources for children who are aging out of foster care, as well as understanding how our policies, how our elected officials affect all of the children who are in foster care. And social media is a great tool to get that message out, as well as talking to the politicians and talking to nonprofits in person and giving information and training sessions or even guest lecturing at universities.
Okay, so I have so many questions. I feel like with every update you gave, I was like, oh my gosh, I have to ask about this. So I want to go kind of back to the beginning. When you were
Yes.
younger, when you were growing up, two kind of questions. What were you thinking that you would maybe be one day, or what would your career be? And then also what did money look like in your family? How did you talk about finances? Was that even a
Yeah.
thing?
Yeah, absolutely. That is a very twofold question. With a complex answer. So number
Mm-hmm.
one, what I wanted to be, um, I watched Legally Blonde, and then I dressed up as Elwoods for Halloween when I was 7.
Great.
So going to law school was always something that was there. I actually got a
Mm-hmm.
pre-law degree, specializing in constitutional law. That was my plan going into college. But then combat arms opened to women. I was in Army ROTC, so I had a commitment, whether it was in the reserves or active duty. But once combat arms opened, I decided, like, go ahead, put my name in the hat,
Mm-hmm.
integrate women into that role full time. And I'm really glad I did that. That did kick off law school again. Um, but I always knew I wanted to be a mom. But I always knew I wanted to work. I was always very interested in politics as well. I
Mm-hmm.
think some of that I got from my dad. My dad always said, I'm not raising kids, I'm raising an adult. And it's important to not, age appropriately. I'm
Right.
not talking to my 2-year old about politics all the time, but you see the world, right? And to
Yeah.
be engaged and not just turn a blind eye and to help those who need your help. Um, so I knew I wanted to be a mom. I knew I wanted to be involved in my community. And I pretty much figured out I wanted to go to law school. I was always really good at arguing, and it still drives most of the people in my family crazy. Because even if I'm not right, I'll find a way to be right.
Mm-hmm.
And then I remember once I we had to do like a career fair project in it was 7th grade, and I did mine on wanting to be an FBI agent. And my teacher said, she's like, you need to pick like a more feminine job. And my parents got like all up in arms about it. And I was a very shy and passive child. Um, I was ahead of grade, so I was younger than everybody. We moved around a lot. It really wasn't until like high school and then really college and after, and then I would say after motherhood, I like really started to come into my own and being
Mm-hmm.
engaged and outspoken. So I was like, oh, that's embarrassing. My parents were like, no, you can be an FBI agent. Like
Right.
went and talked to this teacher, and I'm like, yeah, if someone said that to my daughter now, I'd be like, meeting now.
Yeah.
But when I was leaving the military, I actually got accepted to the FBI Academy. And really, that was my plan. That's what I was going to do. I didn't even know corporate jobs were an option. No one in my family had been in that world, but there's some reasons we ended up not going that route. Pay wise, family wise, all
Mm-hmm.
that didn't really work out. So, and then to answer, what did money look like in my home growing up? Background on that, both my parents grew up very, very poor,
Mm-hmm.
very low income. My dad's dad was a janitor. He passed away when my dad was 16, so well before I came into the picture. And then my grandma, who also passed away before I was born, my dad was 50 when he had me, 49, around there. She was a waitress, so they worked incredibly hard. Um, but my dad did grow up very poor. He's
Mm-hmm.
like, I never even knew I was until pretty much high school. Um, but he was able to get a scholarship to college, and then he went to Vietnam and kept getting master's degrees essentially because of the GI Bill.
Mm-hmm.
And then my mom, on the other hand, did grow up very poor too, but had a very different experience with that, faced a lot of eviction and housing instability. Um, and so she had a mindset that was very like, if you have it, spend it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, she ended up getting our family into a lot of debt, kind of behind my dad's back. Before my parents divorced, she emptied my college fund without telling anybody
Oh
that my
my
dad had
gosh.
he really wanted to be able to afford for me to go to college. So he did a lot of really hard work to build that back up. And where my dad was very much like very frugal, we save. Part of it's his fault. When my parents divorced, there were times where like he'd be like, "Oh, your mom spent this much because like this is what things cost," and my mom was a stay-at-home mom. But yeah, I mean, I was planning to go reserves and right into law school, and but I ended up loving it and wanted to go active duty. I did have this fear, and especially some teachers played into it that,
Mm-hmm.
if I went in the military, I wouldn't get married, I wouldn't have kids. And the high school I went to in Utah, I think a lot of people who went to high school in Utah had this experience where, especially women, were taught, like, yeah, maybe you'll go get a degree, but like you'll get one locally, and you're really going there to meet your husband. You need to get married and have kids and stuff right away.
The
Um,
MRS.
mhm.
Yeah.
If even going to college. Like there was no college prep at my school. There was no any of that. And I had teachers tell me like, well, if you take this, like you're throwing your life away. You're never going to have kids. You're never going to get married. Like no one wants to be married to someone who's in the military.
Wow.
And so that was like really in my head. And I did have this fear. So that was like two sides I was fighting. And luckily my dad's voice won out of like, you have your whole life to be a wife and a mom. And like,
Right.
please give yourself a shot. Yeah, you take the oath of enlistment, you are committed. You either are serving 4 years or 5 years active duty, or you're paying back everything they spent on your training
Mm-hmm.
and your education in that, or you're enlisting to pay back that time.
So then what did being in the military look like after you graduated?
Yeah, so I graduated and commissioned the same weekend, and then 14 days later, I reported to active duty as a second lieutenant. I did some summer camp training and then I went to Bullock. So that's a 6-month training course because I
Mm-hmm.
was an armor officer. So I went to Armor Bullock. A little bit of training after that. Went through kind of a traumatic life event during that time, but picked it back up. I was 21 when I graduated and commissioned too. And by the time I was 22, I was at my first unit in Fort Riley, Kansas, where I took over as a platoon leader for a
Mm-hmm.
tank platoon. Really enjoyed that. I integrated women into combat arms in that unit. So when I first got there, there were no women serving as armor and infantry officers or on the enlisted side. So my job was to go in, be there for 6 months, and then we could open it up for enlisted soldiers. So it was kind of twofold. I was there doing my platoon leader job, but also making sure the culture was okay that women could come and serve here. So it was myself and 100 and some men in the company.
Before I follow up on that, I wanted to ask, when you say combat arms, can you
Yeah.
explain what that
Yeah.
means?
So there's three branches in the military that are considered combat arms. Well, technically two, but there's a third that's really considered it most of
Mm-hmm.
the time, and that would be armor, artillery, and infantry. Artillery opened right after I got into ROTC, but when I joined ROTC, armor and infantry were roles that women could not serve in, either on the officer or the enlisted side.
Okay.
So like Ranger School was closed off, all these things, and then by the time I commissioned, right before they opened up, Congress said, no, we're allowing, as long as the standards met, you're doing everything the same, women can serve in these roles.
This was only a few years ago.
It was declared in 2016, so the first year group was 17, 18. Yeah, so when I
Wow.
started, I was one of 50 women who had served in armor infantry.
I did not
Yeah.
realize that.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
My first week living in Kansas, first moved there, I met my husband.
Mm.
And 5 months later, we got married in a courthouse before going
Wow.
to Korea. We were lucky enough we got to deploy together. We weren't in the same unit as a non-combat deployment, but we got to go together. My battalion was down south in South Korea, but my company got attached to his battalion, so we actually got to work together. And then COVID hit. We got orders back to Georgia, so I took over at a basic training company. He took over airborne school because he had a course out there. Um, and we had our first daughter, and then a few months, 11 months later, we had our second daughter. They were both not super duper planned, and our first one was definitely a super duper surprise. Had no idea. It was like 9 weeks, so we didn't feel young because he had just been captain. I was the first
Mm-hmm.
lieutenant. I owned a house. I'd been divorced already, like remarried and owned a house and had promoted in the military and had been a platoon leader and had been overseas, and he'd been the same. And I was from Utah, so all my friends were on normally like their second or third kid that I went to high school with. So it didn't seem young, and I'm like, wow, that was really young. And even when we left the military, like, oh, our life would probably look a lot different had we made that transition without children. So I
Mhm.
wouldn't change it, but I wouldn't encourage my kids to do it either.
So when you had your kids, were you back in the US?
Yes, they were both
Okay,
born in the US. Yeah.
got it. But you were still in the military.
Yes.
What was that experience like?
That really shaped a lot of my philosophy for the rest of life because with my first daughter, I had 3 weeks of leave. I'm sorry, I
Hmm.
had 3 months of leave,
Okay, through it. Yeah.
and not charged leave. So I'm not, I cannot be at work. That wasn't even something like I had to request. It was something I could not be at work. It couldn't be
Hmm.
denied or anything. At least the first 6 weeks. I had 6 weeks of like convalescent leave, which is, recovering from giving birth, and then 6 weeks of parental leave. And my husband had 3 weeks of parental leave.
Hmm.
And he had some flexibility. He was in a course. He didn't take it right away, but he took it later, and that was not charged. Like that was just free leave. And it was stressful because it was COVID. And when I went back to work, I became an acting commander and then was offered to stay in command. My husband's in command. So we were both on call 24 hours a day. And we were called 24 hours a day. We didn't even get a spot in the daycare wait list. So we essentially were paying for a nanny. And the hours we were having to do were we couldn't have an au pair either. We'd looked that route, but visas because of COVID, visas were on
Right.
hold. So my whole salary was to childcare with our first child. When I was pregnant with my second daughter was the first point that I had the ability to leave the military. My first contract was up. For officers, you can't it's not like, hey, your contract's up, you can leave or you can re-up. You have to request to get out. So I kind of had been back and forth. And then we made the decision that I was going to request to get out, and that my husband was going to get out as well.
So how did you finally make the decision to leave the military and also your husband at the same time?
Yeah, well, we actually decided that we wouldn't be doing it at the same time.
Okay.
So I was getting out. I started doing photography, something I always had a passion for. Um, the entrepreneurship on the side. But he got orders to Italy,
Hmm.
and these are like really cool orders, and they're hard to get. And he interviewed and was selected. It was a big deal, but it was going to be his last job, and
Okay.
I would not have been able to work. There was a lot of back and forth. It was a very difficult decision.
Yeah.
And he ended up giving up those orders so that I could pursue a career. I went through a headhunter company. I talked to a bunch of other people that had done it. Like I said, I applied to the FBI. Couldn't have done that overseas. As well as it would have again been on call 24/7. Our
Hmm.
child care bill would have been more than I made. So yeah, I we had a lot of people telling us it was a bad idea, that it was a terrible idea, it would never
To
work
leave.
out, all these things. Yes, well, for not for me to leave, but for my husband to leave as well, and to give up these great orders, for me to take a chance on a corporate career.
Hmm.
But I got a job offer, for like a little over 100,000. It was a really cool job. I loved it. So I actually moved in with his parents. He
Hmm.
stayed in Georgia while he was finishing up his time in the military. So once I accepted an offer, he put in his request to leave the military as well. So we kind of like tag teamed that. And I took a job. So I lived with his parents 4 days out of the week. So we were able to assume the loan, even though rates were in like the six to sevens.
Hmm.
We got the loan at a 2.2%. Um, and yeah, so we bought the house. We moved in there. He took a job at the Pentagon as a government contractor, but we knew like the house was kind of temporary. We were more just like figuring out where we wanted to live in Virginia, if we wanted to be in Virginia. Um, and we decided to move to the Richmond area so that we could become foster parents and get a bigger space. And I took a promotion with a much smaller company. I started at a Fortune 500 working in sales, and then I took a director of sales position to get to start my own division for a company in the Richmond area. And I did that for about 18 months. And he was a government employee at the time, but then we had the Doge cuts and he couldn't be hybrid anymore. So that's like a 2 hour drive to work every day. Our boys had just come. So he took FMLA and then stayed home with the boys until he just started a new job. And then we'll go to the fire academy. So we're like finally figuring out like our permanent careers for the most part, but I do feel like, my family made a lot of sacrifices for me to pursue a career to then turn around and be like, actually, I don't think this
Yeah.
is right.
But it kind of sounds like you've, at least to right now, you've ended up where you should be. Like even as you were telling that
Yes.
story, I was like,
Yeah.
wow, everything's falling into place. Like,
There was a lot of pushing it in that story.
yes,
There were times
sure.
where like square peg, round hole, we were gonna make it work one way or another.
Right.
But yeah.
What led you into wanting to be a child advocate and like into wanting to foster? Because that seems like
Yeah,
it is such a big part of your life right now and where you want
absolutely.
your career to go too.
Yeah, it's one of the biggest parts of my life right now, and definitely have made the switch for that. So I want my career to go, whether it's through law school or whether it's getting more into
Mm-hmm.
politics and maybe running for office one day to be able to have more change on this. I always knew I wanted to foster.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a good answer to that, and I should at some
Yeah.
point. And then I had a friend from high school do it, and I talked to her, and I'm like, if she's able to do it, and she's like 21 right now with two kids of her own, pregnant with a third, like we have no excuse. So it was actually when my daughter had a seizure, my husband was like, okay, like now's not the time. We just got out of the military. Like, give us some stability, but we have talked about it. And he's like, we'll have a sign. And we just kind of like prayed for a sign. And our daughter had a seizure, and we're leaving the hospital at about 1 in the morning. We're exhausted. We're coming off of
Mm-hmm.
adrenaline. And I get a text from my friend. She's like, hey, I'm fostering two kids. Rights got terminated. It's like they are looking for someone to adopt them. She's like, I am not in position right now. My husband's finishing residency. We're about to move states. Like, we are not the family to adopt. I know we're cross state. I don't know if you're licensed yet or not, but like, would you be interested? And the kids would have given us four kids, three and under. And we're like, we need to sleep on this. Like, we can't
Yeah.
answer this right now.
Yeah.
So we go to bed. We're at my in-laws' house because my oldest daughter, they picked her up
Mm-hmm.
from the hospital and they were watching her while our younger one was in the hospital. And we came down for breakfast next day, just like looked at each other and burst out laughing. We knew our answer was yes. We're like, we have every reason to say no. Like, we don't have room in the house. Like, we text our realtor and we're like, we need to find a bigger house. And we're like, we'll figure it out. So obviously that didn't work out. Cross states like really hard. We weren't licensed yet. We're like, that was our sign. Let's get licensed. And then we're like, okay, so we need to look at moving. Like, let's look at the Richmond area. We can afford a much bigger house with more space. And we started looking at building our house, and then I got a job offer to, it was a promotion, it was more pay, and it was in Richmond. So, we're like, okay, that worked out. Let's go ahead and make that move. I just always kind of felt this calling to it. So we did the training, we got our license. More of the advocacy side, I would say the reason it was always on my heart, but it's so hard to begin or to know the need or to feel like you're capable. Like, for me, I've been doing it long enough now that I'm like, anyone can foster. Like, what? Yeah, get into it. But I look back and like, okay, I was terrified to become a parent biologically, and then to, ask someone, especially if they aren't already a biological parent, to become a foster parent. And I realized it was a lot of the content I'd gotten on social media that made me feel capable. I'd
Mm-hmm.
already felt inspired, and there was the spark there, but it made me feel capable. And that, hey, these are regular people. Like, foster parents are not angels. They are not superheroes. They're not like, these are
Mm-hmm.
regular people. So I'm like, I can do this. So then I'm like, well, I should turn around and do the same and share ours. And that turned into a lot more advocacy. And then even, now we're looking at food stamps being cut. And like, there's such a misconception on who's on SNAP. And this is
Yeah.
affecting foster kids. I'm like, if I
Right.
know this and I have the ability to speak and I have a voice to it, how could I not? So some of it is yes on social media and advocacy and like getting that message out, but a lot is also talking bipartisan wise, right? Talking to Republican leaders and talking to Democratic leaders and to nonprofit leaders, all these, and advising and being like, hey, this is how this affects foster care. And
Definitely.
yeah,
And so during this time, you're working in corporate.
yes. And
At,
I didn't take any time off when the boys moved in.
oh wow,
Yeah,
because it was just
I didn't
hard
really,
to.
yeah, I didn't have it. There was no FMLA. There was a lot of responsibility on me. I just expanded my team and hired new
Mm-hmm.
people. I just started my MBA as well. So within a few weeks, my team went from two people to hiring three more, bringing on a lot more clients, starting my MBA, and then it's like, oh, two more kids. Okay.
Yeah, that is a
So I mean,
lot.
I took a few hours off here and there, but I didn't take like any chunk of
Like
parental leave or
any time.
anything.
And at this point, how much were you making?
My base was 132. But I had a car stipend that wasn't taxed and
Mm-hmm.
like a phone stipend. And then a little bit of a bonus structure annually as well. So, oh, and I had a gas card. So total comp was around like 150-ish.
Did that feel like it was doable with everything that you had going on at that time?
Yes, and there was a lot of like, oh, you should be grateful. Like this is a lot. I did find out I made a significantly lower amount than my male peers in the same role, even though I had like more people on my team and more going on. So that I was kind of like, that's
Yeah.
not cool. And I think the answer is yes and no. You
Yeah.
know, the role had some flexibility and stuff, so that brings me to yes, but also like I was working a lot. And by the
Mm-hmm.
time I left, like the amount of stress and everything it was causing, no. But it definitely would not have been enough to support a family of six, even, you know, just renting a regular, you know, our house is 1,800 square feet, but like,
Mm-hmm.
um, no,
Right.
no.
How did you find out that you were making less than your
The
male
wrong report
peers?
got sent to me. Yeah. And then I asked a former coworker who had left a few weeks before, but was a good friend. I'm like, are you reading this the same way I am? He's like, yeah. He's like, that's more than I was making. I'm like, well, I'm like, if you don't mind me asking, like, what were you making? He told me, and I'm like, I'm making 20,000 less than you guys. Like,
Wow.
um, yeah. So I brought it up, and I'm like,
Uh-huh.
you know, I'm like, I'm coming up a year at the company. Would really like to discuss this, and was told like, well, you know, they're older and have more experience and this. I'm like, yeah, but we're doing the same role.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I could see like a little discrepancy for more experience and all that. I'm like, but we're doing the same role, and like, I'm actually doing more. Um, But I also felt like, what am I going to say about it? Like my husband just lost his job and I have four kids. Like, what am I going to do here? Like
Right.
I have to stay here,
Right.
and just continue to work harder and do more. And yeah,
Did that contribute to you eventually wanting to leave that role?
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely did.
So if you don't mind getting into it, what really did lead to that, to wanting to leave corporate, to
Yeah.
wanting to do something else?
Well, specifically to leaving the role I was in, I was not getting any support. We had new leadership come in, and I was the only director and the only one who had a team that didn't work out of the same office. So I was geographically in another state, and it was just constantly like they would change a meeting time without telling me. And so then I wasn't on the meeting. Then it's like, oh, well, Elizabeth isn't working. She's not here. And I'm like, I've been sitting on this meeting waiting for you guys to start it for 10 minutes, and no one told
Right.
me that you did it an hour ago.
Right.
I couldn't get a hold of my boss, like my VP. Sometimes I'd go 2 or 3 days of like calls and emails and nothing back. Um, they never came up. It was a, you know, about a 2 hour drive up to our office from the main office. Like I visited twice in 6 months. And there's one point we had a conversation and he told me that I was lying about how much I was working. He's like, I'm going to be generous and not call you out in this meeting. Like, there's no way you're doing this much. Like, you're lying. He's like, you're taking all this time off. Like, you just took 2 days off of sick leave. I'm like, wait, are you talking about when my daughter was in the hospital? He's like, yeah. And I'm like, I, my daughter was admitted to the hospital and was septic, like my 3-year old. And I had not taken time off before. The whole 18 months I was with the company, I'd taken 2 full days off. And then 2 times I'd taken off a half day to go to court for our foster boys. Had not taken any sick leave, had worked a ton on weekends, a ton after hours. Um, and I had one vacation coming up that I was taking off 4 days. So it's just like you're not working. And it's like telling me I'm lying about working when I'm barely seeing my family. I hadn't been home. And we were having this conversation at 7 o'clock at night in my office, like completely missed family dinner. Um, and so I was like, what? Like, you're gonna question my integrity and like the things I've accomplished in my life, I wouldn't have been able to do if I'm not working. And then, yeah, so I was just like, this sucks. And it was constantly, um, the name of the game was just like turning and burning sales reps, which I wasn't okay with. I had a rep who, um, she had some troubles with the pregnancy, and the attitude was like, well, we just need to fire her because this is going to be too much work. And like, we're not giving maternity leaves. Like, she's going to miss quota because, you know, when she has a baby, she's going to go into labor and like, she won't be working. Um, And there's just a lot of things from like I'm not okay with how we're talking about people. I'm not okay with like burning through people solely for profit. I wasn't okay with how customers were being treated. And I was just so stressed. I
Yeah.
was, no support, no any of that. Like, but I think the thing that kept me for so long is the team I built. I really respected everyone I worked with.
Mm-hmm.
There were so many other phenomenal people in the company that weren't just like right on the East Coast that I really respected and I really enjoyed working with. And so that's why I stayed longer than I felt like I should have. I essentially was looking at leaving like July. I didn't leave until September. And yeah, so there's just a bunch of things. And finally, like, I was almost crying, like heading in to meet with a client one Wednesday morning. And I'd started talking with like a week before, I kind of like put some feelers out without being like, hey, I'm leaving. But, like one of my old coworkers became a really good friend. I'm like, if you hear of anything, like I
Mm-hmm.
think I would consider it. Like, and he's like, yeah, like I left for a reason. Like I was just seeing how long it was gonna be till you left. Like, yeah, let me make some calls for you.
Right.
And that's when I started getting some other offers. So I was gonna wait a little bit though. Um, make sure there are no loose ends, right? I don't want to leave any clients hanging. I don't
Mm-hmm.
want to leave any of my team hanging. I don't want to leave like the whole rest of the team on the East Coast. I don't want to leave like anything missing. So, but then I called him on the way there. I'm like, I haven't signed with another company yet or like gotten a hard offer. I'm like, would it be dumb to quit? And he's like, you need to go. And he's like, and it was essentially we talked about, it's like, I don't think this opportunity is going to come. And he's like, also like, you've had these like very backroom conversations thing, like, with two or three people, of, like, maybe I'd leave for the right thing. He's like, but until you actually leave and like your name gets out there that you have left, like, and that you're in the market, you could be leaving offers on the table because people don't even know that you've left yet.
Right.
Um, so he's like, if you can financially afford to go, a month or two without a paycheck, like I would leave and I would take some time and like actually field your offers and figure out what you want to do.
Right.
And so then I called my husband. I'm like, I have to do it. And even then, like, went home, like, typed up my letter of resignation, and I didn't want to just like email it in though. I kept trying to call my VP, and like, it wasn't until the next day I actually got a hold of him. And then it was like, oh, you just like emailed it in, didn't have the courtesy to call. I'm like, no, like, don't say that. I tried multiple times. You just won't get back to me. And I just immediately like cried with so much relief. And I'm like, everything else I can figure out, but like,
Yeah.
I and my husband had just gone back to work and just how much we have with our kids and all that. I mean, even they'd had a conversation with me when we became foster parents on how they were questioning on if I was the right person to do this job because, it's hard to parent and do this. I'm like, are you talking to any of the guys that have this? And like, we had other directors throughout the company who were foster parents too, and I'd never had this conversation with. And it's just like you're doing too much that you're not going to be able to work hard enough for us between being a foster parent, mostly being a foster parent and having young children, and then pursuing an MBA, that it would take too much from the company. And I'm like, I don't want to be in an environment like that. I don't want to
No.
hire people onto an environment like that. So yeah.
So, how are you feeling now about your current career? And I know this is probably a tricky question, but how
Yeah.
much money are you making right now? Or what
Yeah,
are kind
I
of your
wish I
goals for
knew.
now? Yeah.
So one thing is, because my husband's working, there were savings. We're
Mm-hmm.
also moving into a new house, so I'm renovating that as well, which is taking a lot of time. But I am not really paying myself anything. Anything
Mm-hmm.
that's coming in, I'm, waiting till the end of the year. I know there's expenses. I know I'm going to owe taxes on it.
Right.
So I'm not paying myself anything right now because I don't have to, and I'd rather have like that cushion, and then I can start once it's a little more steady. I'm like, okay, I can like
Mm-hmm.
give myself a paycheck, probably move to an S corp on the tax side of it, and like actually give myself a salary. Um, and I have some investment properties, like the sacrifice I made in my early 20s and stuff, have provided enough that like I could take this leap and there's enough passive income coming in from other things. Have a little bit of VA disability too, and that gives a little bit of a cushion. When we move, I'm pulling my girls out of school. I'm gonna homeschool them for 8 months until they start kindergarten. So
Yeah.
it's more going into that role, but I don't know. I mean, in general, I know last year I was just right over 200,000. If I was paying myself per month right now, real estate wise, it's been about 50,000 this year.
Mm-hmm.
Social media wise, probably going to be right at the same at like that
Okay.
50,000 this year,
Yeah.
which is crazy because it's all like October, November.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like maybe like 6,000 of that was the first majority of the year, and then the rest has been like now. And
Yeah.
that's estimating out till December. So
Is
I
that
don't
like
know. I feel like I
brand
should
deals?
know, but
It's really
yes.
hard, especially like you just left full time 2 months ago.
I would say, I know what I want to go into as a child advocacy attorney.
Mm-hmm.
The pay is not good. It's one of those things that's like social work, all of that. Pretty sure in Virginia, starting pay right now is like 65,000 a year. So
Okay.
like 100,000 less than I was making.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say consistently, I can rely on like $2,000 a month into my
Yeah.
family budget. Right now,
Yeah.
I think that will increase, but again, it's not something I'm trying to make like consistent or an income or anything out of. I'm letting it grow to what it wants to be. I also don't want it to, because I never want to be in a position where I feel like I have to take a brand deal
Mm-hmm.
because I've budgeted, hey, I bring in this much a month into our family budget. I don't want to do that. Because I do think as I've opened the doors to like this side of it a little bit more, I've seen like, oh, if you want to make like really polarizing or divisive content, there's a lot of money in that, like a lot of money in that. And making inspirational and unifying and
Yeah.
educational content, there is not as much
Right.
money.
Right.
But I am seeing a little bit of a shift there, but I never want to feel like I have to compromise anything because I need the paycheck. And I recognize like that is a very large point of privilege I'm coming from. Like my mortgage is paid, all that's taken care of. So it's just like a little extra,
Yeah.
which is cool, but it is a very, very privileged place I'm coming from. But also with that, I feel like I should do something with that.
Utilize that.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I should
Yeah.
like I
That
have
totally makes
this privilege,
sense.
so how could I be quiet when these things are going on?
Yeah. So throughout our conversation, you've mentioned real estate investments, and I believe that's even part of your financial portfolio right
Hmm.
now. I just want to talk a little bit more about how you were able to invest in real estate, especially at such a young age, and if that was part of military benefits
Yeah.
or kind of, okay, yeah.
Yeah, it was definitely part of the military benefits. I looked at when I got to my first duty station, I had a 0%, I had the ability to buy 0% down without having
Mm-hmm.
any primary mortgage interest or anything on it or insurance on it. So with the VA loan, I got to do 0% down. There was a funding fee while on active duty, but I kind of looked at it, I'm like, why would I not buy a house?
Yeah.
And rates were in like the fours at the time too. Like, why would I not buy a house and have roommates? And then I didn't know there's a word for it. Now there's like you can look up a ton of podcasts and stuff about like house hacking. I'm like, so it just made sense to me ahead. I'm like, I would rather buy a house. My mortgage, let's say at the time it's like $1,200, and I have two roommates, and they each pay me $400 a month rent. And then I'm building equity in it. This is an area a lot of veterans end up settling.
Mm-hmm.
So I like being able to help people settle down here and know, hey, you actually can't afford to buy a home, and it's probably going to be a lot cheaper for you to buy than it is to continue to rent.
Yeah, so I'm curious. We talked a little bit about what you're making now and kind of what you left with corporate. How much were you making in the military?
Yeah.
And kind of, yeah, could you take us through that financial timeline?
Yeah, I think almost anyone will tell you that our military is severely underpaid, especially like there are some jobs where you are working insane hours. We're asking people to say goodbye to their families, even if they're
Yeah.
not deployed for weeks at a time. I was an officer, so I think when I commissioned, I was making, I want to say it was around like 47,000 a year,
Mm-hmm.
including BH. And I remember seeing my first paycheck and I'm like, oh my God, like this is like real money.
Right.
And now it's, now I look at what that paycheck would be and it's not much. But I don't know what the equivalent is right now, to be honest, but when I got out, I was a captain. I left the military in 22. I want to say with my BH, like total comp for where I was. So it's also kind of part of it is your benefits, so it's different.
Okay.
You're not paying for health care, you don't have health insurance coming out. Some states you're not paying state income tax.
Mm-hmm.
But it was around like 75 to 80,000. And I don't know
Okay.
the exact number. I actually want to say it was probably a little high for where I was, but let's say like I was stationed in Georgia where the cost of living wasn't as high, but if you were out in Hawaii, your pay would be more like your base would have been the same, but your pay was more based off of, obviously it's a lot more expensive to rent a
Right.
house in Hawaii. But outside of that, like what you're being paid to be at work, the exact same.
When you went, when you started making like over double in the corporate world, was it Was it really easy to also spend more money? Was Does that make sense? Like, or
Yes, yes and
yeah.
no.
Okay.
Yes and no. When you're in the military, like you are going to spend a lot on your gear and your uniforms, and
Mhm.
um, I think there's a lot that like comes out of people's pocket, especially for officers that you don't think about.
Yeah.
Where I had a corporate card, so like if I was buying client donuts, it's just on a corporate card and stuff like that. It was never like my personal money.
Right.
But on the personal side, we also were moving and moved to a higher in like a higher cost of living area, and all of a sudden like daycare went up. It was also during like one of our highest rates of inflation. So like
Mhm.
we had to look back, we're like, are we spending that much more like lifestyle creep, or is
Mhm.
everything just more expensive too?
Right.
Because the first year it felt like, okay, we're making a lot more money. But after that, like it doesn't feel like we're making that much more money just because of we had more kids and then how expensive everything is and stuff. But we also just had like so many changes in our life too. Most of our like spending of it has been on moving or kid stuff as we have more kids into our home. We've been able to donate a lot more. I think that's the bigger thing. Like whenever we
Mhm.
go to events, like we can kind of just donate whatever we
Right.
want. And then when I left, part of it was the financial side of
Mhm.
it. I knew there was more money in corporate, the idea of like making six figures. And it was still time where like, oh, you made six figures, like you made it, you're set, like you
Yeah.
can raise your family. We know that's not what that is anymore. Like,
Right.
even with two people making right at 100,000, most places like you're still going to be a little stressed if you
Mhm.
haven't bought a house yet and all this to raise a
Right.
family, and if you're paying for childcare and all that. But so part of it leaving was financial, but it's terrifying. 'Cause, like I left before I had a job, so like you're not guaranteed to get one, and you're
Right.
leaving a very stable paycheck. Like, and it's for most people, it's the only thing they've ever known. A lot of people don't join the military after working in corporate. You do have some
Mhm.
subset, but for most people, and for me included, I was 17 when I took my oath of enlistment. I was 21 when I commissioned, so I'd only known having a paycheck come in that way. Like I had my side college jobs and whatever. Um, and it is stable, right? There's not layoffs.
Mhm.
Sometimes we have
Mhm.
reductions in force, but like there's not the risk of layoffs. You can't just like
Right.
be fired, right?
Right.
Maybe you get terminated from like the role you're in, or like you're
Right.
relieved from the role. Like you're still having your paycheck and you still have your medical care and you still have housing.
Mhm.
So yeah, that was like
Yeah.
it it was scary, and that's I think a lot of people's hesitation when they leave the military is the fear of the unknown and having so many possibilities open to you. And that's something, when I walked away from my corporate job, I still kind of grateful with is like I've never had like a full-fledged of possibilities before because I was a parent so young and had
Mhm.
so much responsibilities as an army officer so young, that then even walking away from a very high paying corporate job and saying like, okay, the world is my oyster, but what am I going to do with that? And some things have come in and I'm just excited to see it grow though.
Well, it sounds like your pay really increased from
Hmm.
leaving the military and going into corporate,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Like pretty much over doubled. What was it
Yeah.
like though, like in other aspects, like going from the military, which is such an intense environment, like very hands-on, the stakes are just very different, to corporate, which obviously is intense and higher stakes in its own
Hmm.
way, but obviously like two very, very different environments. Like what was that like for you to make that jump?
Well, and I also went into a corporate role where I was a territory manager, so I was remote and I made my own schedule with it. I
Mm-hmm.
was out on the road seeing clients. I had an expense account, so when they handed me like this corporate credit card, I was like mind blown. I'm like, you
Yeah.
like, and they're like, well, like you can order this bottle of wine and like pay for these steak dinners. And I'm like,
Right.
what? I'm like, if we were in the field and they threw us an MRE, like that got deducted from your paycheck. Like, what do you mean? And that was really hard for me. And then I saw my first bonus and I thought it was a joke, to be honest. Like, I think after taxes, it was like $10,000 for a quarterly bonus. And I genuinely like thought it was a joke. And I had a company car and just like all these perks on top of my pay going from in the 70s to 120 base plus these perks and the freedom. And like if we were gone for a conference, right? And it was a time we did work a lot like overnights. You were away from your family. I actually spent more nights away from my family in a hotel and a corporate job than I did in the military just by chance. And
Mm-hmm.
when I had my kids, but they'd always be like, make sure you get that time back and you're spending time with your family and you don't burn out. And I'm like, what? Like it was weird, and
Yeah.
you definitely needed that discipline and the structure because you had so much freedom. Like you know, you could run yourself off the road really quickly and
Right.
um, not be working hard enough because no one's checking in 24/7. Like you're not
Right.
logging in right at 8 a.m. and out at 5. But to me, like it feels normal now because I was in the corporate world almost the same amount of time I was active duty in the military
Mm-hmm.
at this point. And my husband's been out for a while too, so like we've been fully away from it. But I can look back and like probably downplaying it. But remember, like it was weird. It
Yeah.
felt really weird and uncomfortable. And I didn't have any family that worked in corporate ever, like even including my in-laws. So I'm like, is this right? Like, is
Navigating.
this
Yeah.
normal? Is it like I didn't have a mentor in it or anything? And that's why I'm really glad I went through a headhunter company because I did end up having those mentors and those people to ask questions. And yeah.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, it's just like a totally different mindset. And also in the corporate world, it's almost like there are just these different unknowns that, like, I think about like when
Hmm.
my family's from India, when I go to India and visit my family, they're just like the way you like enter a store, the way you ask for something at a restaurant, like it's so unspoken, but people just kind of know how it
Yes,
is. That
that was
reminds me,
hmm
yeah, yeah,
that very much like that. I mean, there were times I would like sign off emails with like, "Thank you, sir." Like, oh, bad, wrong world, my bad.
right.
There were a lot of skills like translated over really well and were really helpful
Mm-hmm.
of military culture into corporate. And I do think there is a large crossover. But yeah, it was weird. I think especially if I
Definitely.
hadn't gone into sales, I wouldn't have done as well with that switch because it's a world too where like you can be a little more friendly, you can
Mm-hmm.
overshare a little bit more. People don't mind if you cuss as much. Where if I'd gone into like a very traditional corporate role too,
Mm-hmm.
that wasn't an outside sales role and stuff,
Right.
I don't
Right.
think I would have done quite as well. I think I still would have done okay, but it would have been much more of a culture shock too.
That totally makes sense. Yeah.
But the money was the biggest culture shock for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
For sure. You do get comfortable with it really quickly though. But
Right.
yeah,
I mean,
it
that's kind of the
I was also the first
yeah.
one of like my friends to get out and have a successful corporate career. And
Yeah.
same for my husband, all of his friends. He went to West Point. It's like, they
Mm-hmm.
all were planning to stay in forever. And they were all like, that's a joke, right? If you ever like actually shared what you made. And
Yeah.
I wouldn't have thought of this, but it made me think of it. You we talk about how it's like taboo to talk about money and what you
Yeah.
made and stuff. And it never really was in my home. It was in my husband's, but also part of it in the military, everyone makes the same thing.
Right.
Unless you're stationed in a different place or
Yeah.
anything, sometimes you have like special jump pay and stuff. But for the most part, your base is the exact same as your peer that's the same rank.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we have a couple more years in, but like within a very small ratio, like your pay is exactly the same. There are no like asking for raises. There are no performance-based
Right.
bonuses that are monetary or anything like that. And that's kind of like the weird shock. It's like, hey, like you can negotiate your salary
Yeah.
and you should, 100%
Yeah.
you should. And yeah, like your peer, even if they're doing the same thing as you for a different company, might make like a lot more, or have like these different perks, or make a lot less. And you never thought about that because you all made the exact same thing.
Right. So it's
Everyone
like,
in the same rank made the exact same thing. So,
yeah. So yeah, even in corporate, I mean, I'm assuming going from the military to corporate, you're like, oh, there are these like little games I have to play of
mhm.
negotiating, of like asking for raises and things that you definitely have the skills to do, but you just never had to do in the
No, you never
military.
had to do. You
Yeah.
had to use the skills for other things, right? To
Right.
ask for things for your unit, for
Mm-hmm.
all this, but to like just directly ask to be paid more money, no,
Right.
it was never a
Wow.
thing.
That is really interesting. Yeah.
And
Wow.
it's even when you talk with your friends, you went to college together, or especially for my husband, like they all went to West Point together and
Mm-hmm.
graduated, and like all these things, they've always made the exact same amount of money.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And suddenly that's different, and your
Yeah.
life start to look really different. And that's been like a weird thing.
Yeah. That is really interesting.
I've talked about that too, and I haven't talked about it in so long that I totally forgot that like yeah,
Yeah.
you make the exact same. Like there's no lifestyle creep. There's no, outside of like if
Mm-hmm.
you invest in real estate or any
Mm-hmm.
of that, like you can't do anything on the side. Or if you came from family money or
Right.
something like that. When I left my job, that was like the saddest part of scaling back is like okay, I'm giving a lot more time wise in advocacy, but like I can't give as much money now.
Right.
Um, that part was really cool
Yeah.
though. I did
Yeah.
enjoy that was, we'd go or we get invited to, some fundraiser and we could kind of just whatever we felt like giving we could give and that was, within
Right.
limit. We weren't like dropping
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
50
Yeah.
grand at these things and stuff, but like, if they're like, can anyone donate $1,000? Like this covers this. It's like, yeah, I can. And like
Yeah.
that's cool. So
That's
I
cool.
I never
Yeah.
really and it was just like I never had to worry about like, okay, we can pay for daycare. And I never
Mm-hmm.
had to like worry about what I was buying at the grocery store. And like, yes, costs are rising and we're feeling it and we know that. I was like, I never really like was affected by it. Like I
Mm-hmm.
didn't get to live the lifestyle that like what our incomes, we had a year where like I mean we brought in over right under 400,000. Our lifestyle didn't look like it, but like when our boys came and we needed a bigger car, like I was able to trade in. I had a Volvo XC90, and like I was able to trade that in for a Suburban
Mm-hmm.
the same day. Like there was no like
Right.
having to like super think about that or planning it. And I think that's where like we really saw it. We never had to
It's
worry about
yeah.
like picking up the bill. If someone came to visit us, like we could go out to dinner whenever we wanted and pick up the
Mm-hmm.
bill. If we wanted to have an experience, we didn't have to worry about it. So like yes, in that regard it was really easy to spend it more, but materialistically like
It
not
sounds
really.
like it was more of the financial aspect wasn't necessarily like heavy spending. It was taking the mental load off of
Yes, I would say that
thinking
would be
about
100% it.
purchases.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, outsourcing where we needed it and then the mental load of the
Yeah.
purchases.
Yeah, so it sounds like you have really molded your career around parenthood, around foster care advocacy. And I know that that has even recently included taking a step back from the corporate world, walking away from almost $200,000 a year, and really sitting with the fact that parenthood and this advocacy is more important to you than a paycheck. What does that mean to you, and how do you think that this has affected the decisions that you've made?
Yeah, I think it's twofold. I always wanted to be a parent.
Mm-hmm.
I never planned to be a parent this young, this early on, but it is something I always wanted to do. And when I was in the military, I didn't have the option to leave. You have a baby, I was still in contract, so it was just having to figure it out. My husband didn't have the option to leave either. So we had to make our careers fit around being parents while navigating a global pandemic. So
Right.
the first part of that is, I mean, there was a time my husband was supposed to be home and he had an emergency that 100% needed him there. But I had to be at work at 4 a.m. and Nanny was not awake yet. What am I supposed to do with a 4-month-old baby? So I strapped her to my chest and I led a rec march with her strapped to my chest and my rec on my back because there was no one else to watch her at the time. Was it ideal? No. Did I get in trouble for it at work? No, because I always say, like, if you want something done, ask mom. We're gonna make it happen. And there was no other choice. But also because I worked so hard and I made such a name for myself too, I had that freedom to do that. So twofold of it, I don't want to say like, you have to work like you don't have kids, but when you are really good at what you do, you made a name, you do have a little more leeway. So when you do need to put parenting first, but walking away from the corporate career, I always said like I'm not going to give up my family for a career. And when I really evaluated what impact am I making on the world right now, and is this the world I want to leave my children? The answer was no. My children don't need me to make $200,000 a year. They need us to be able to have food and a safe place to live and, a standard of living, absolutely. But they do not need me to make $200,000 a year. They need me to put my money where my mouth is and make the world better for them. And if there's a way I can do that in my career, how can I not do that? And that was really the biggest turning point on leaving a corporate job, walking away from that money was I can't leave this world to my kids, and I
Right.
can't just pretend it's not my problem because I have a high income.
I totally understand that. And that is, I think, even in your content, that just like really shows of this is the type of world that I'm trying to build through your advocacy, and then also through like the 4 children that you are
Yeah,
raising
yeah,
into adults who will
yeah.
become
I mean,
adults one day.
I'm not going to leave my daughter in the hospital, right, to get to work when I've barely taken any time off. I'm not
Right,
going to do that. And if that's the expectation, then sorry, I'm not going to do
right,
it. There are so many careers and so many jobs where you would never be asked to do that.
right.
So I'm not going to put my kids in that position.
Yeah.
Our family motto is when you have more than you need, you build a longer table, not a higher fence. And that's like a big driver of foster care, but also in renovating our house to make it, we're putting double ovens in. That was my biggest thing, so we can feed more people and have more people over. But part of that is needing the time to do that.
Well, Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining us. This has been such a powerful conversation. I think a lot of parents, a lot of people, a lot of people who might be at the middle part of their career, the beginning, the end, someone feeling stuck. Like, I think a lot of people could really relate to the topics that you talked about. And I really appreciate you being so open, so willing to share. And I know I learned a lot and took a lot away.
No, I appreciate you saying that. And I think the biggest thing is it's never too late to change and to soul search.
Mm-hmm.
And we tend to put ourselves in these little boxes and want to introduce ourselves by our titles and be really proud of what we've done at work, which is awesome. But you're never too old or too late. There's going to be a million reasons to stay safe, but it's okay to take the leap and to trust yourself.
Well, thank you again.
Thank you.
And
I really appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity to share.